This conference will now be recorded.
In the last session, we talked about different other topics related to SAP FICO. We understood how profit loss is calculated, what you need to do as a FICO consultant, what are the different points which are related to SAP FICO consulting. Today, let us try to understand certain more points related to accounting with respect to SAP FICO consulting. Now, first, we will be trying to understand certain basic points from the accounting. Later on, I will connect all these points with SAP FICO. And then in the upcoming sessions, I will give you clear understanding about what exactly you are going to learn, what exactly you are going to do as a FICO consultant. Okay. So let me write something called accounting basics. When I write something called accounting basics, I want everybody to understand certain points which are related to basics of accounting or fundamentals of accounting, which is very, very important for any SAP FICO consultant. First thing, normally when we talk about accounting basics, your accounting basics normally contains debit and credit. Anything that you talk from the accounting point of view, you will be talking by way of debit or by way of credit. First thing, we should know how you are going to decide what is debit, how you are going to decide what is credit. Even before we come to that stage, first of all, what is debit, what is credit? We do not need to know the definitions of it, but at least if you know what is debit, what is credit, at what level, on what basis you are going to decide, what is going to be debited, why this is debit, and how this is debit. If you are able to understand these points and if you are able to convince yourself with your answers, I am going to debit X account for this reason, I am going to debit X account because of these reasons, and how this X account is debited, all these things we need to understand to make sure that we are convinced first before you convince the other person. Whether you are able to convince the opposite person or not is always secondary. Make sure as a finance background candidate or as an accounting student or as a candidate or as an interested candidate to learn SAP FICO, to become a FICO consultant, you must be convinced with your accounting first. This is your self check before you step in to SAP FICO. Let's say when I talk about debit, normally where are we going to use this debit and credit?
A business
So in
transaction.
general, in business transaction, you are going to use debit and credit. Now, let me put something called here account types. When I put account type, I will write certain things like I will put assets, I'll put liabilities, I'll put incomes and expenses. These four I am calling it as account type. Next one, against account type, I am going to write nature. What is the nature of asset? Is this P&L account or is this balance sheet account? Asset is your balance sheet account. Liability is your balance sheet account. Let me put BS, which represents balance sheet. Next one, income. Income is your P&L account. I'll write P&L here. And the next one is your expense. Expense is also a P&L account. Let me write P&L here. Now, I will write something called impact. I will write something called impact. What impact is going to happen when you debit? What impact is going to happen when you credit? Normally, when I'm talking about asset, what will be the impact? Normally, there are only two impacts. Impact number one is increasing, impact number two is decreasing. Either either the amount will go up or the amount will come down. If your amount is going up, what is going to happen? If your amount is coming down, what is happening? And how you are determining this up and down from the accounting point of view by way of representing debit and credit. If I say increase and I will tell decrease. I'm talking about account type, which is asset, liability, income, expense. Similarly, nature of the account, balance sheet or P&L. Next one, the impact. I would say increase or decrease. If the asset value is increasing, are we going to debit or credit if the value of the asset is increasing?
Debit.
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 Debit. If your asset value is increasing, you are going to debit it. If your asset value is decreasing, you are going to credit this. Okay, if the asset value is increasing, you are going to debit it. If your asset value is decreasing, you are going to credit this. Similarly, for liability, if your liability value is increasing,
Credit.
Credit.
if your liability value is increasing, you will be crediting the liability. If your liability value is decreasing, you will
Debit.
debit the liability.
Debit.
Right? Similarly, for your income, if your income is increasing,
Credit.
if your income is increasing, are we
Credit.
going to debit or
Credit.
credit?
Credit.
You will be
Credit.
crediting your income if your income is increasing. What if your income is decreasing?
Debit.
You are going to debit this. Similarly, when it comes to your expenses, if your expenses are increasing, are we going to debit your expense or credit your expense?
Debit. Debit.
Debit. Expense.
You are going to debit your expense if your expense is increasing. Similarly, if your expenses are decreasing, if your expenses are decreasing, we are going to credit the expenses. We are going to credit the expenses if our expenses are decreasing. Now, this is basically your accounting impact or the usage of debit and credit in your accounting. So, you cannot give a standard definition for debit, you cannot give a standard definition for credit because the way it is behaving with the nature of account is different. Right? It is not doing the same activity. In some cases, your debit is increasing, in some cases, your debit is decreasing also. Correct? Similarly,
Yes.
your credit is also behaving both ways. Your credit is increasing in certain cases, your credit is decreasing in certain cases. Now, though nobody is going to ask you at this level questions, but it is always important you start from this level so that there is no point of confusion when you are working on any project. Because there are many situations in your consulting where you need to apply your mind, where you need to think from this point of view to understand whether what you are doing is correct, whether what your client is explaining we are able to understand or not. Okay, this is one point that we need to understand. And in this, let me put a heading for this. Okay, this is one thing that first we need to understand. Now, your accounting cycle begins from journal entries. If you write accounting cycle, first one you are going to have is always business transaction, not requirement. First thing is always business transaction. Based on the business transaction, you are going to write a journal entry or accounting entry. Let me write journal entry. This journal entry is also called as journal voucher. This is also called as accounting entry. People call it with different terminologies. Majorly, people call this as JV. Pass a JV, they will tell. When they are talking about pass a JV, they represent pass a journal voucher. Clear? When somebody is talking about what is the JV for this or which JV is posted, they are representing about journal entry or journal voucher or accounting entry. Now, on what basis you are going to decide how you are going to write an accounting entry or a journal entry? We are not going to by heart the journal entries. Instead, you are going to understand the logic behind writing the journal entries. If you understand these logics behind writing the journal entries, it will be very easy for us to understand whatever you are working on SAP FICO. Because whatever you want to do on SAP FICO, you must record one accounting entry. If you are not recording an accounting entry called debit and credit, there is no point of learning, there is no point of working as a FICO consultant. Am I correct? Whatever the config, whatever the report, whatever you do on SAP FICO is completely dependent on journal entry, debit, credit, journal entry. If this debit, credit, journal entry is not there, there is no accounting. If there is no accounting, there is no point of SAP FICO. This is straight away dependent. And if we are clear from these points right from the beginning, during your journey, you are going to find everything is smooth and simple, easier. Let me write these journal entries. Now, before I write any journal entry, your journal entries are based on what? Based on what we are going to decide what to debit, what to credit?
Golden rules.
You are going to decide based on golden rules of accounting. When you talk about golden rules of accounting, there are 3 rules of accounting. So one is your first one is what?
Personal account,
You have personal account.
personal, nominal,
Second one,
and real.
personal account, real account, and nominal
Nominal.
account. Okay, I'll say this as a rule, and against this rule you will have a debit and you will have a credit. According to personal account, what will be debited?
Debit the receiver, credit the giver.
According to personal account, you are going to debit receiver, you are going to credit giver.
Giver.
And according to real account, you are going to debit,
Debit what comes in,
Debit
credit
what
what
comes
goes
in,
out.
credit what goes out.
right? You are going to debit what comes in, you are going to credit what goes out. Right? What comes in will be debit, whatever is going out will be credit. According to nominal account,
Debit all expenses,
Debit all
Losses
losses,
and
expenses
credit,
and losses.
expenses.
credit
debit
income
all
and gains.
expenses and losses,
Losses.
Losses.
credit all
Income
incomes,
and gain.
Comes and
gains.
Gains.
This is basically
gains.
your golden rules of accounting. This is another point that you have to remember. Now, when you write any accounting entry, whether it is in your general accounting or if it is in your SAP accounting, your accounting entry debit credit is decided by these 3 accounting rules. No surprise, you may be questioned about telling or explaining the accounting entry in your interview tomorrow if you are trying for a job as a FICO consultant. No surprise, you will get questions asking you to explain the accounting entry for it, how this accounting entry is coming, and where you are maintaining this accounting entry. All this kind of a background about accounting, they might question you. Now, let's say if I take simple examples. If I take simple examples like point number 1, I will take rent paid by cash. Now, when I say rent paid by cash, this rent payment is nothing but my business transaction, correct? This
Sir.
rent payment is nothing but my business transaction. In accounting, you are always going to record the transaction once the transaction takes place. Once the transaction takes place, you are going to write the accounting. So before the transaction takes place, you are not going to write anything, which means if there is something which is going to happen tomorrow, if it happens tomorrow, only then you are going to record it in accounting. You are not going to imagine today, you are not going to record it today. Correct? Accounting is not imagination basis, accounting is always reality basis.
Yes, sir. Accrual
Now,
basis.
if rent is paid, you are not going to record the rent entry unless you make the rent payment or unless you are due for rent. Correct?
Yes.
Alright. So you must utilize a building or a premise before you record the accounting entry or before you capture that rent as your financial impact. Now, when it comes to rent paid by cash, what you are going to debit?
Rent account.
Rent account data to cash.
Debit to cash account.
So I am going to write rent debit and I am going to write cash credit.
Cash credit.
In this, you should always remember debit amount. Let's say, for example, I'm taking any random amount, 100 on the debit side, 100 on the credit side. Let me put a total of this. You should always remember anything that you are writing on the debit side will always represent a positive number. Okay, debit will always represent a positive number. Credit will always represent a negative number. This is common even in SAP. Whenever you are not able to understand whether a particular transaction is being debited or it is being credited, simply look at the amount. If you look at the amount, if you see it is a positive number, that is debit. Blindly you can tell this is debited. If you look at the amount, if you find a negative sign, minus symbol there, blindly you can tell this is credited or this account is credit. So this point you need to remember, and for every accounting document, debit and credit must be equal. If you do a total of debits, if you do a total of credits, it must be equal. In short, it must be zero. Sum of your debit and sum of your credit should always be zero. If you are not able to equal your debits with credits, you will not be able to capture that accounting entry. Even if you write it, that will be wrong. If I put debit 100, if I put credit, let's say 104, is this correct?
No.
This is not correct. Now this logic is there even in SAP. Even when you pass any accounting entry in SAP, if your debit amount, if your credit amount is not matching, system will not allow you to post that entry. It will tell difference is too large or correct the balance amount. System, in short, SAP is also going to verify whether your debit amount is equaling to your credit amount or not. So in SAP, what system will do? It will validate everything from system point of view, because these things are programmed in SAP. These things are programmed in SAP. As a result, whenever you are recording any transactions, certain basic accounting checklists are validated by SAP on its own based on the logics that are predefined in the system. But when you are looking at this from the manual point of view, you need to make sure you do not have any confusion understanding these points. In short, you are able to debit rent, you are able to credit cash account. Rent account we debited because rent account is expense, correct? We debited rent because rent is an expense. And you credited cash because when you paid rent, you have given cash. Your cash is going out. Because your cash is going out, you have credited cash account. In short, your debit is based on nominal account, your credit is based on real account. We do not have to go at this level to understand, but it is always better you know certain basics. Right? Let's say I will write one more entry. If I put electricity bill paid by cash, for this what will be the accounting entry?
Electricity account data
Electricity
to
account debit to cash account.
right? I am going to write electricity debit, and then I'm going to write cash credit. Here also some XYZ amount, let's say 110 on the debit, 110 on the credit. If I do a total, it should become 0. Now here on what basis I have written? Initially, to understand the logic, you need to look at this. Once you understand the logic, you are not supposed to think from these points every time, because you're not going to write any exam to by heart this. You have to get the logic, concept behind this, so that whenever you look at any transaction, automatically you're thinking from a different point of view. Now, according to us, whenever you get any expense, whenever you get any loss, whenever you get any expense, whenever you get any loss, you have to debit that particular transaction. Now, if I'm talking about electricity bill paid by cash, I have electricity bill, I have payment which is made through cash. Electricity bill is straight away an expense. So any expense will be debited. I will blindly debit electricity account. I paid the amount using a cash. I am going to credit my cash account. Similarly, you can take n number of expenses. For any expense, irrespective of the nature of it, you are going to debit your expense. For any expense, irrespective of the nature of it, you are going to debit your expense, and the way you paid the expense. If you are giving cash for the expense, you are going to credit cash account because your cash is going out. In case if you are paying the amount by bank, let's say you are giving a check, you are giving any bank transfer, you are going to credit your bank account because amount is being deducted or amount is going out from your bank account. Clear? So this is with respect to your expense related transactions. In case if I say any revenues, let's say sold items to Mr. A. If I say sold items to Mr. A, now what accounting entry you are going to write for this?
Mr.
A account
A
debit to sales account.
sales account credit.
Right? I am going to write Mr. A debit, and then I am going to write
Sales credit.
sales credit. Now if you see why you are debiting this account, why you are crediting this account, let me take 100 on the debit, 100 on the credit. If I do a sum, I need to make sure I get 0 balance. Now Mr. A is debited because debit the receiver. When you are
Not
selling
working.
something, no, you are going to debit Mr. A based on the personal account, the person who is receiving. When you are selling to somebody, somebody is receiving whatever you are selling, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, sir.
Right? The person who is receiving when you sell is always debited. So according to personal account, you are debiting the receiver. Mr. A is receiving when you are selling. Now on the credit side, you are going to write sales account because sales, it's an income. Sales is straightforward, it is an income. Any income or any loss, sorry, any income, any gain, in short, any profit that you get, blindly you are going to put on the credit side. Yesterday, when we talked about P&L, when we talked about P&L yesterday, we were talking about getting a profit. We got a profit of 2000. This profit was negative 2000 or positive 2000. Yesterday we were
Negative.
getting a profit. This is a negative 2000. Now we
Is
were
it?
talking about profit is always on the credit side because according to your accounting rules, you are going to credit your income and your gain. Gain is nothing but a profit. If you get profit, your profit is always credit. Credit is always a negative number. So that is why whenever you look at any P&L statement, if you find your P&L statement result is a negative number, that is represented as profit. If your P&L result is showing as positive number, that is called as your P&L loss. Now let's say if I talk about discount received. If I talk about discount received, what will be the entry? If you receive any discount, what entry you are going to record?
Vendor account debit to discount received.
I'll say simply to simplify this, discount received in cash.
Discount account, discount debtor,
Cash account debtor, discount account credit, discount received account credit.
Cash will be debit and I'll put
Discount allowed.
discount received credit. Correct? Let me take maybe 110 on the debit, 110 on the credit. Sorry, 110 on the debit, 110 on the credit. I need to make sure for every accounting entry that we are writing, debit credit amount is equaling to 0. Right from the beginning, we need to make a habit of looking at all these things, because whenever you post any document, if you remember, there is something called a simulate in your SAP. Whenever you record any transaction, there is an option called simulate. This
Yes,
is
sir.
simulate is nothing but checking the accounting entry called debit and credit. Whenever you simulate any posting, you are doing nothing but checking what entry system is passing, which account is debited, which account is credited, what is the debit balance, what is the credit balance, whether debit and credit is becoming 0 or not. This is what exactly you will see when you simulate any transaction while parking or while posting any document. Now here you debited cash account because when you receive the discount, you are receiving something called cash. Debit what comes in? By way of discount, you are receiving the cash, and cash is coming through discount. So discount is an income. Any income, it will be credit. Something like this, you will be writing the accounting entry. Let's say I'll put something called capital invested by cash. If I put capital invested by cash,
capital debtor, cash credit.
if I
Cash
put
account debit
capital
to
invested
capital.
by cash,
Cash account debit
right?
to
Capital
capital account.
Cash account
capital account
debit.
debtor.
To capital.
Okay, let me take this also. I'm just taking amount just for understanding purpose to make sure debit and credit becomes 0, nothing beyond that. Now for any capital related entry, you will be debiting the cash account or whatever the form you are introducing your capital. If you are investing by way of cash, you will be debiting a cash. If you are depositing your capital amount in bank account, you are going to debit bank account. If you are bringing any fixed asset, you will be debiting fixed asset. But in general, just for our understanding, we will take cash account, assuming you are starting your business with cash. Here, why did we debit cash account?
Sir, because the money is come into the picture, like into a
Right?
business.
Right. Because in your business, you are receiving a cash, you have debited the cash account and you have credited capital account. Why?
Because the
Because it is a
principle of
liability.
personal, who is the
I think
giver?
Right.
it's vice versa, sir. Capital account debit, cash account credit. If I'm not
No,
wrong.
no. The entry
Business
is
is
correct.
receiving the cash in the form of capital in the liability of the business to give back to the owner.
Correct.
Cash account debit to capital.
Cash account debit to capital account is correct. When you are
Yeah.
introducing a capital into your business, so you are introducing a capital by way of cash. Now, you should always think from the business point of view. So, there are two ways here. So, thinking from personal point of view and thinking from business point of view. Whenever you are talking about accounting, are we supposed to think from business point of view or are we supposed to think from personal point of view?
Business point.
Business point.
You should always think from business point of view, not from the personal point of view. These two will always be reverse, ulta. These two are always ulta. If you think from personal point of view, it sounds different. If you think from business point of view, it sounds different. Let's say if I am doing my business and I am telling that I invested cash. According to me, my cash is going out personally, correct? If I am thinking from my personal point of view, my cash is going out. So I am going to credit cash account. If I am thinking from business point of view, I am receiving the cash in my business, I am going to debit my cash account. So personal point of view thinking and business point of view thinking are always ulta, are always opposite. So whenever you are talking about accounting, even when your SAP FICO is accounting, remember when you see it, when you look at it from the SAP point of view or accounting point of view, always think from business point of view. What is the business impact with this transaction? From the business point of view, business is receiving a cash. So you are going to debit 100. Now business is not investing its own money. Somebody is giving money to business, which means owner. Owner is investing money in the business. Today, if owner is investing 100 in the business, tomorrow he wants to recover his 100. So when he is closing the business, business is supposed to pay back whatever the investment that he had done at the beginning, along with certain profits. Even if there are no profits, he is supposed to recover whatever he had invested in the business. Those who are not talking can be on mute. Okay, so when business is receiving the amount, so we are going to debit the cash account. Since you are receiving the amount, debit what comes in. You are crediting capital account because according to business, it is not business own money. Somebody had invested in this, and when they leave the business or when they close the business, business will have to pay back whatever the owner had invested. So this becomes a liability to the business to pay back the amount. So your capital account is always credited. Next one, if you talk about any other asset purchase, for example, I'll say furniture purchased by cash. If I say furniture purchased by cash, what will be the accounting entry?
Furniture account debit to cash account.
So I will be debiting furniture and I will be crediting cash. Let's say I'll take some 110 on the debit side, 110 on the credit side. To make sure that I'm able to write the accounting entry proper, I will do a sum for the debit and credit to make sure the sum of my debit, sum of my credit is becoming 0. Now this is how you are going to write the basic accounting entries. To write these basic accounting entries, you must keep these points first. Type of accounts. By looking at the transaction, first thing you need to understand, you need to determine whether it is asset, liability, income or expense. This is your point number 1. The moment you look at any transaction, make sure you are able to differentiate between asset, liability, income, expense. Once you are able to differentiate between asset, liability, income, expense, second one you need to cut it down. You should not always talk about asset, liability, income, expense. Now you need to break it down into P&L balance sheet. The moment you look at any document, the moment you look at any transaction, you must be in a position to tell this is a P&L account, this is a balance sheet account. So the background behind identifying P&L account balance sheet is identifying the account type. If it is asset or liability, you are not telling asset or liability, instead you are telling balance sheet. If required, you will break down balance sheet into asset or liability, otherwise simply balance sheet account. Similarly for P&L, the moment you look at any GL account or the moment you look at any transaction, make sure it has got expense account or income related account. If it has got any expense or any income, you are going to call it as P&L account. If required, you will break down P&L into expense or income, otherwise straight away P&L account. Next one, once you understand it, you need to think from this accounting rule point of view. If it is any expense, blindly debit side. If it is any expense, blindly debit side. Any loss, blindly debit side. If it is any income, if it is any profit, blindly on the credit side. Anything that you are receiving, especially your assets, blindly on the debit side. Anything that you are losing, especially the asset, anything which is going out from you, blindly credit side. Anybody who is giving you the benefit or you're receiving something from somebody, that is always on the credit side. Anybody to whom you are giving, in short, the person who is receiving the benefit from you, is always on the debit side. So you should have your own understanding. You have to simplify this according to your understanding, but not by hearting whatever you listen from me or whatever you read from any other sources. That is wrong. Try to understand it. Make sure that you are able to simplify the points, simplify the content according to your understanding. Based on your understanding, make sure you are able to explain it to the other person tomorrow. When you are explaining, when you are talking, always remember, you should not sound like you have by hearted, you are reading. You should talk casually. Make sure you are able to explain with different examples of your own. So that should be your first target. When you're explaining to somebody, when you're talking to somebody, do not sound like you're reading. This is most common, especially in your interviews. We try to tell things in a different way, in a systematic way, but in that mindset, we will lose what we know. So you try to read from somewhere, you try to list out somewhere, but you by heart it, and then you try to read out whatever you have listed out, whatever you have noted down. That is point number one mistake that you should not do. Remember things in such a way that you are able to recollect it, you are able to explain it with your own examples at any given point of time. For that, you need to simplify it, you need to see it from your own perception. Have your own perception, make sure you have your own examples, and you are able to explain it to anybody without having any confusion. So slowly you have to start developing this, because tomorrow when you are attending interview, it is oral examination. When I say it is oral examination, somebody is going to ask a question, you are supposed to answer by talking. It is not a written examination, it is an oral examination. If somebody is asking you a question, you have to talk and then explain and then convince. Correct? If the other person is feeling that whatever I am talking is sounding like I am reading from somewhere or I googled the information, the other person will not be convinced. If the other person is not convinced, they will not select us in the interview. When you are talking in your interview especially, you have to sound as casual as possible. If you casually talk, if you casually explain to your friend or to anybody, the way you talk in the similar way, in the similar tone, you have to talk to your interviewer. Alright, your tone, the way, whatever you talk, the explanation, example, let it be as casual as it is. Talk in the layman language, because the intention is to check whether you are aware of the process, whether you know the subject, whether your understanding is right or not. Nothing beyond that. I just wanted to make sure you are aware of this particular topic, you know the concept. I don't mind whether you use technical terminology, you do not use technical terminology. I'm not going to bother about it. I am only concerned whether you are explaining me, whether you are able to convince me or not. To convince me how you are explaining, what example you are taking is your choice. Right? If you are by hearting, whoever is sitting in front of you, you are going to play the same thing as if you are playing a song. But don't talk like a song. Depending on the other person, depending on the question, you try to change, you try to modify your explanation. This is possible only when you know about the subject properly. This is possible only when you feel that you are confident on the subject. If these two are missing, we normally get into a confused state. When you're on the confused state, whatever we talk, we try to forget things. So that should not happen. For that not to happen, we need to remember right from the beginning, from the basics. It is as simple as like you are learning everything from the scratch. So that there is no point you have any exception, you have any excuse that I don't know accounting, I'm not from accounting background, I studied commerce or I studied computers, I studied engineering. These things are not supposed to come into picture. because now SAP FICO is very open to anybody. Nobody is asking whether you are from accounting background or from non-accounting background. Nobody questions. Earlier, there was a situation where somebody must be from commerce graduate. You must be from accounting background to become a FICO consultant. And then you must have domain experience, like you must have experience in accounting to make sure you get into SAP. But now it is not like that. Whether you are from BTech, whether you are from computers, whether you are from any other domain, if you know SAP FICO, you are welcome to SAP FICO job. I don't mind, I don't care what is your background, what is your qualification. Nobody cares about it in the present market. It is all about your skill set on the technology. It is all about your confidence, your understanding on that particular topic. If you're talking about SAP FICO, first point that should strike your mind is SAP FICO all about accounting. If you are good at it, you can easily crack any interview. You can happily work, manage for your lifetime on SAP FICO. Because this is the one time that you are going to revise the things. Later on, you're not going to revise. Otherwise, no surprise. Once you get into the job, you may have to refer what is the account, why this is debit, why this is credit. So that situation should not come, because these are quite common, possible 100% in every project for every FICO consultant if you are not good at accounting. Okay. So once we know what is the debit, what is the credit, in short, the basic accounting entries we are able to write. Next thing you need to remember about something called financial impact. Next thing you need to know about, there is something called financial impact. When I'm talking about financial impact, let's say I'm talking about one accounting entry. I'm talking about an accounting entry, or you're talking to your client and your client is telling how will it affect or how this will have an impact on my financials. So when they're talking about what is the financial impact or how this will affect or impact my financials, they're talking about two terminologies. One is it's a P&L impact. Second one, it's a balance sheet impact. One is your P&L impact, the other one is balance sheet impact. This is a quite common term that you use on a daily basis if you're working as a FICO consultant. What do you mean by P&L impact? What do you mean by balance sheet impact? If you're talking about any particular business process with your client or with your users, they will simply put a question, how this will impact my financials, or where this will impact in my financials. They are asking, they are expecting you to explain this will impact your P&L, this will impact your balance sheet. But on what basis you are going to tell that this is going to impact your P&L or this is going to impact your balance sheet? For that, you must know which accounting entry is processed. For that, you must know which accounting entry is processed. In your accounting entry, what accounts are debited, what accounts are credited. For example, if I write example number 1, same thing I'm going to repeat, rent paid by cash for 1000. What will be the accounting entry for it? Rent debit
Cash account.
and cash account credit. I am going to put 1000 on the debit side. I am going to put 1000 on the credit side. I'll do a total. This is becoming 0. Now tell me, is this going to have a P&L impact or balance sheet impact or both? What is the impact of my financials with this accounting entry?
Both.
It will have impact on both. Now you need to look at your P&L. You need to look at your balance sheet also. From this accounting entry, you have rent on the debit side. Rent is what?
Expense.
Rent is expense. Expense will go to where? Where will your expense
Profit and
go?
loss.
P&L or
P&L.
P&L.
balance sheet?
P&L.
Expense will go
P&L.
to P&L. Now on your P&L, you will have 1000. Whether it is debit or credit is immaterial as of now. First, you need to understand what is there on your accounting entry. If it is rent, what is this rent first? Is this rent a P&L or a balance sheet? How you will understand whether rent is P&L or balance sheet? First, you need to segregate whether this is asset, liability, income, expense. If we are not able to segregate this, then there is a big problem. We are going to face this problem for lifetime. If you are unable to fix it now, this cannot be fixed in future. Because again, you have to come back to the basics. If you start from the basics, there is no point, there is no reason you will have to come back to the basics. If rent is expense, you know that expense is a P&L. This 1000 is going to reflect in your P&L account. Any amount which is going to reflect in your P&L account, you are going to tell that there is a P&L impact. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Similarly, if you talk about cash, cash is asset. Asset is part of your P&L or balance sheet.
Balance sheet.
Balance sheet.
Asset is part of balance sheet. Now this will go and sit in your balance sheet. Where it will go in balance sheet is a secondary. But whether it is going to P&L, balance sheet, we have to segregate first. Now, by looking at this entry, this is going to have impact on both P&L and balance sheet. Now, when I say my P&L impact, when I say my balance sheet impact, we are talking about change in the number. You are talking about what? You are talking about what? Change in the number. If my P&L number is changing, what is your P&L number called? When you prepare a P&L, what number you are going to get?
Profit.
Either profit or loss. I am going to get either profit or loss. Now, when you pass any debit to the P&L or when you pass any credit to the P&L, assuming my current profit or existing profit in P&L. If my existing profit in P&L, let's say, is 5,000. Now, if I am trying to pass this accounting entry, this is going and hitting my P&L. What is happening to my P&L? Is this debiting my P&L or crediting my P&L?
That's
Debiting pain.
debiting.
This is debiting your P&L. Anything going to debit side of your P&L will reduce your profit or increase your profit.
Reduce the profit.
Reduce.
Will
Reduce
reduce
it.
the profit because
Yes.
in P&L debit side you are going to write expense. Any expense will reduce the profit. Any income will increase the profit.
Increase the profit. Yeah.
Now, right, you have to look at this. What is this account? This is your rent. Rent is expense. Expense will reduce the profit. So once this entry is posted, I'll say revised profit in P&L. From 5,000, it will come down to 4,000. Correct? The revised profit after passing this entry will become 4,000. Now I will tell this entry is impacting my P&L. Correct? This entry has an impact on my P&L or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'll
Yes.
say it has got an impact on my P&L. Similarly, if I say my balance sheet, I'll write here existing asset and existing liability. If my existing asset, let's say, is 8,000, my existing liability is also 8,000. With this, what is going to happen if I pass this entry? What will happen to my asset? It will become 9,000 or it will stay 8,000? It will become 7,000.
7,000.
My asset will become 7,000. Correct? Why 7,000? Because you are crediting to the cash account. Cash is asset. You are crediting to the cash. Cash is your asset. On the top, we have written something. Anything that is credited in your asset will decrease the value. Correct?
Correct.
Let me come down. If I put this, after passing this entry, my asset value will become 7,000. And what about my liability? Is there anything that is posted in liability here with this entry?
No.
No.
Then if earlier my asset liability is becoming 0, right? Earlier my asset liability is becoming 0. If I take only 8,000 here, because there is no entry, is this becoming 0?
No.
This is not becoming 0. Now what is going to happen? How my balance sheet will get rectified with this?
We have to be adjust our loss account into the reserve and surplus.
Right? So anything that is posted to your P&L, your P&L result will be adjusted in the liability account. Correct? Anything that you are posting in P&L account, your P&L account will get affected. If there is a change in the P&L, if there is any impact on your P&L, in your P&L, what is the impact? Debit or credit? Your P&L has got debit impact or credit impact?
Debit.
Debit.
Your P&L has got debit impact. Now, when your P&L has got a debit impact, your profit has come down or your profit has gone up?
Come down.
Gone
Your
down.
profit has come down. So, which means in the earlier or in the existing liability, you are considering profits of 5,000. Now your profits from 5,000, it has come down to 4,000. What is the difference in your profit? 1,000 reduced. Correct? From your profit, 1,000 reduced. This profit will be reflected in your balance sheet liability side. If your existing liability is 8,000, your profit has come down by 1,000. So you have to reduce 1,000 from it, which means this will now become 7,000. Correct? Now with one
Can
single
you please
accounting
repeat this?
entry.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Can you please repeat this again, if you don't mind, sir?
Okay. Now when we passed this accounting entry, we have an impact on the P&L. In P&L, what impact you have got? You had a debit impact on your P&L. Anything which is posted to the debit on your P&L will result reducing your profit. So as a result, what happened? Your P&L profit from 5,000, it has become 4,000.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
Now
Yes.
your P&L profits are part of balance sheet liabilities. Your existing liability value is 8,000, which means this 8,000 is inclusive of 5,000 here.
Yes. Yeah.
Now what happened to your 5,000 profit? 5,000 profit is now becoming only 4,000. So if your
4,000. Yeah.
profit is reducing from your liability, you have to reduce. How much is reduced from your profit? 1,000 is reduced from your profit. From this liability 8,000, it includes 5,000 profit. Now I need to remove 1,000 profit from it. So if I am removing 1,000 profit from it, 8,000 will become 7,000. Clear?
Yes, sir. Got it. Yeah.
Now if you see this, there is only one simple entry. There's only one single transaction which is creating impact everywhere in your P&L, in your balance sheet, in your profit. Correct? This is one simple basic entry which is creating impact on your P&L, on your balance sheet, on your profits, on your expense, asset, everywhere. Now like this, you are going to pass n number of entries on a daily basis in every organization. Agree? On a daily basis, there will be n number of entries posted on a daily basis. Everything is debit credit. Now every entry that is getting posted in your SAP, is this going to have the same impact or not?
Yes,
Every
sir.
entry that you are posting in your SAP is also going to have the same impact. If I pass this entry, if these are my existing numbers, my revised numbers will have to become 4,000 and 7,000 each. But how we are going to validate what we are doing is right or wrong is always based on accounting. Your SAP FICO is accounting. You are going to decide whether what you are doing is right or wrong only with the help of accounting. If you do not know accounting, you will never know what you are doing is right or wrong. Am I correct? If I do not know accounting, I will never come to know what I am practicing, what I am posting, what I am seeing, what I am checking in the system is correct or not. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
If I do not know accounting, whatever I am practicing, I will never come to know whether it is right or wrong. I will keep on blindly creating the entries, blindly posting the different transactions. I will verify the report. But when you do it, what will happen? Let me show you. Let me log into SAP now. Let's say I created all the transactions, or I created let's assume that I have created my all the configurations or all the settings are completed. Now I want to test if system is working fine or not. Correct? Point number one, when you talk about SAP FICO, first thing that everybody talks about, first thing that everybody thinks about is configuration. Am I correct? Anybody who talks about SAP FICO, they will be talking about configuration. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Assuming I have completed my configuration by any ways. Let's say I found a document on the Google, or somebody gave me the material, somebody gave me the step-by-step screenshots, somebody gave me the recordings. In any way, by looking at some source, I am able to manage my configuration. I've done my configs. Settings I am now perfect. I can close my eyes, I can tell you what is the step, what is the T code, in which field what value to be given, and when you save it, what error you are getting, why you are getting. I am able to tell everything from config point. But now is the actual testing time. Do I need to know if my configuration is right or wrong or not? I need to know if my configuration is correct or not. For me to make sure if my configuration is correct or not, I need to make sure my accounting is working fine. Correct? To check if my SAP FICO configuration is correct or not, I need to post accounting entry. For which, let's say I will go to F-02 or any transaction code. I'll go to any transaction code. Let's say I pass some information here. I will give posting key 40 is nothing but debit. I will select one account. In short, let me display one account here. Let's say this is one of the accounting entry from SAP. This is your one of the accounting entry from SAP, wherein you are going to have debit, credit, bank account debit, capital account credit. Point number one, you can decide whether the account is debit or credit based on posting a key. In manual accounting, you are going to write DRCR. In SAP, instead of DRCR, you are going to write a two-digit numeric code to represent debit or credit. We may understand, we may not understand based on the two-digit numeric code whether it is a debit or it is a credit. But there is another shortcut to identify debit or credit, that is your amount. If you look at the amount, if you find the amount in positive number, if you look at this, this is 800,000 positive number. There is no minus sign at the beginning or at the end. Anything which is a positive number, I call it as debit. Second one, if you see, it has got a negative sign at the end. Normally when you write in your accounting or when you write manually, you will be putting minus sign at the beginning. But in SAP, when you see it on the SAP screen, your minus sign is always at the end, which means on the right hand side. But when you download the data, it will come to the left hand side. On the SAP, negative sign is always on the right hand side. When you download it, it will shift to the left hand side. Now this is minus. I will say that this is credited, this is debited. Now in SAP, are you going to have accounting entry debit credit or not? Do you have debit credit? You have accounting entry called debit credit in SAP. Assuming you are practicing, you have done your configuration. Now you need to verify whether your configuration is correct or not correct. How do you verify whether your config is correct or not? Is based on a particular transaction. You need to post a transaction and make sure while posting the transaction there are no errors, which means system is allowing you to record a debit, system is allowing you to record a credit, and system is allowing you to post a document or save the document without any problems, without any errors. Now, who has to test this? You or somebody will test when you configure, while practicing, while learning?
Consultant.
If you are learning, if you are practicing, who
Me.
has to practice? If you are learning SAP FICO, if you are practicing SAP FICO, if you have configured the settings, who will have to post this entry? You or somebody else? Your friend, your family member will post this,
You.
No, we only.
right? If you configured it, you have to post it. If you have to post it, should you know about the accounting entry, what to debit, what to credit, or I can randomly put any debit, any credit? Is it okay while practicing if I debit any account which comes in my mind, if I credit any amount which comes in my mind, or I should post a practical realistic entry?
We should know practically.
Practical realistic. I must post an entry which is practical, which is realistic. Alright, for that to happen, I must know about accounting entries. I cannot say that I learnt SAP FICO configuration, but I do not know how to pass the entry, debit credit. Now, when you are practicing, you must remember you pass different type of entries or variety of entries. It is not that every time you post capital account and bank account, you repeat the same entry for 100 times. Then you are not learning anything. Correct? You need to post variety of transactions. If you are in an organization or if any organization is doing business, what kind of entries are possible? So we have to start thinking from that point of view. In an organization on a daily basis, what will happen? Sales will happen, purchases will happen, expenses will happen, incomes will happen, they purchase asset, different things will happen. Now what are those different things? We have to start listing out. Based on your listing out, based on your understanding, make sure you are able to put an accounting entry or not. If you are able to put an accounting entry, just think once whether my accounting entry is correct or not. Is this kind of accounting entries are posted in the real environment by the businesses or not? If yes, your understanding is correct. If not, why these entries are not posted? Where am I going wrong? Why I am not able to think? Why I am not able to understand what happens in an organization? What happens in any process? What kind of transactions will come into picture? How they record, how they account this? Because anything that you wanted to record in accounting, no other option. You have to pass one debit, one credit. In short, journal entry must be posted. SAP is no exception to it. Correct? There is no exception in SAP. You must record debit credit manually. Now, when I am passing one entry on the debit side, when I am passing one entry on the credit side, I must know how this entry is posted. Point number one. Point number two. Once the entry is posted, I must know how this entry is going to create an impact, how this entry is going to create or how this entry is going to affect my financials. If I look at any particular report, am I able to understand the report or not? Let's say if I go to GL report, if I go to GL report, am I able to understand how this report is coming out? Am I able to read and understand if there are 100 entries in this report? Will I be able to justify why the balance is showing whatever the number that you see here? And can I verify that this number is supposed to be this much only? Normally what will happen, we will be testing in such a way, we will be practicing in such a way, you will come to the report by looking at the T code. Okay, FAGLL03. I will come to this transaction code, I'll look at this screen, I will put one GL account, I will put one company code, I will click on execute. Okay, when I click on execute, obviously something will come on the output screen. When I click on execute, you will see something coming on the output screen. Majoritarily what we will do, when something comes in the output screen, we feel that it is working. When something comes on the output, we feel that it is working, we feel happy, then we close it, we go to the next topic. Correct? We feel I configured, I am able to post a document, I am able to generate the report. Everywhere I am able to see the output. But is this output correct? Accounting is always a subject to verification. Auditing, yes, no? If output comes, you may be okay as a consultant, but is your client okay if output comes like this? Or he will verify whether the number is correct or wrong? What will your client do? Will they be okay if they see the number, or they will verify the number if it is right or wrong?
They will
They
verify.
will do verify.
They will verify whether the number is right or wrong. If they feel that the number is not correct, they are going to ask you, the number which is coming on this report is not correct. They will simply call you, or they might ask you, they might send an email, dear XYZ, the number that we are able to see on so and so report is not correct. Please advise what is the problem. Now, as a consultant, can you say I do not know accounting? Or you need to sit and verify why the number is coming wrong? No other option, you need to sit and verify why the number is wrong. Before that, you need to ask him, what is your expected number here? Correct? He will simply tell, no, I passed an entry into this account, I took one provision, I took one outstanding from this to this account, my net amount is supposed to be, let's say, 25,245. It is showing only 25,000, 245 is missing. Now it is your responsibility, it is your task to identify why the amount is not matching, whether the system is doing wrong calculation or your client is understanding in a wrong way. If system is doing wrong calculation, you need to check if any settings are maintained incorrectly. If yes, rectify the settings. If your client is thinking in a wrong way, talk to your client, explain them, make them understand that this is how accounting happens, this is how system is bringing the number in this report. Option number 1, if the problem is in your system, as a consultant, you have to rectify it. Point number 2, if your user understanding is wrong, as a consultant, you have to explain them. You have to do both the things. Agree? Correct? Now, to do this both the things, do you need basic understanding of accounting or not required?
It must.
Right? It is a must. There is no exception to it. Now, similarly, once you are able to pass entries like this, we need to understand how your entry is creating impact. For that, what we need to do, we need to go back to the accounting impact. To the accounting cycle. We talked about business transaction, we talked about journal entry. And from journal entry, we are able to understand how this is going to create impact on the different subsequent postings. How your journal entry is creating impact in your P&L, how your journal entry is creating impact on your balance sheet. Now, before you create P&L, before you create balance sheet, there is some more thing. There are additional reports that we need to prepare. If I go back a little top, this is where we listed few points yesterday. We've written something called accounting cycle, in which you have listed business transaction. Based on the business transaction we have listed, you will be writing journal entry. Now we have seen journal entry. Based on the journal entry, you are going to record ledger accounts, or you are going to prepare ledger accounts. In each account, what will be the opening balance, what will be the closing balance, what is the transaction balance. So in short, you need to take opening balance, you need to take a transaction balance, you need to figure out what is the closing balance. Based on every account closing balance, you have to prepare trial balance. Based on every account closing balance, you need to prepare trial balance. Is trial balance mandatory in accounting or it is optional in accounting?
Mandatory.
Mandatory.
Trial balance is mandatory. Now, majoritarily what will happen, most of us, when we learn SAP FICO, we forget about a trial balance. Trial balance majoritarily will not strike most of the people who learn SAP FICO. Am I correct? We don't
Yes, sir.
even talk about trial balance. We don't even bother about looking at the trial balance during the entire tenure of your FICO course. Majoritarily, this is the reality. If you do not know what is trial balance, if you do not know how trial balance is extracted from SAP, whatever the accounting you are doing, if I do not have a trial balance, will I be able to complete my accounting or not? If I do not have a trial balance, can I complete my accounting, my reporting?
No.
No.
No. I cannot complete my accounting, I cannot complete my reporting, because at the end of every month, I am dependent on two reports. One report is representing whether I am in profit or in loss. The other report is representing what is my asset value, what is my liability value. In short, if you want to prepare P&L account, if you want to prepare P&L account, or if you want to prepare P&L statement, your P&L statement is prepared from what? What is the base for preparing your P&L?
Trial balance.
Trial balance, because you are going to prepare P&L account from the trial balance. Similarly, what is the base for preparing balance sheet?
Profit and loss.
Profit and loss account plus trial balance. If you don't have TB P&L, there is nothing called balance sheet. If I provide P&L, if I provide balance sheet, but if I do not provide TB, is that valid or invalid?
Invalid.
P&L balance sheet without a trial balance, is it valid or invalid?
Invalid.
P&L and balance sheet without a trial balance is invalid. Nobody approves your P&L balance sheet if you do not submit TB, because TB is the base for preparing P&L, TB is the base for preparing balance sheet. Now you need to keep in your mind, you must know how you are going to prepare these numbers from SAP, how you are going to extract these reports, how you are going to visualize, how you are going to relate these things from SAP to your manual accounting. Whatever you do manually, you must be in a position to see everything on SAP. If you are able to see it, you will gain the confidence. Yes, this is what system is doing. This is what is happening from accounting side in SAP FICO. Later on, you configure any module, whether it is a simple task or it is a complex task, it is the same process. The process, there is no change. The impact, there is no change, because everything is based on accounting. Accounting, whether you do it from India, whether you do it from any other country, whether a fresh candidate is doing, whether an experienced candidate is doing, is it same or is it going to change?
Same.
It will be the same, because accounting is based on rules. Accounting is based on rule everywhere. These are the global rules. No, nothing is exception. Nobody is exception to it. If you are not following this, this is called as fraud. Clear? So next point, what we need to do is we need to take one simple example. We need to take one simple 2-3 transaction example. We need to complete this accounting cycle. We need to take simple example and we need to complete the accounting cycle to make sure how journal entry is prepared, how ledger balances are prepared, how trial balance is prepared, how P&L is prepared, how balance sheet is prepared, with simple basic examples, let's say 3-4 transactions only, to make sure we get the logic we understand the concept. Once it is done, we need to make sure how these points are verified in SAP. Where do you create the journal entry in SAP? Where do you check ledger balances in SAP? How do you verify trial balance in SAP? How do you verify P&L in SAP? How do you verify balance sheet in SAP? Whether these reports are there, if these reports are there, how these reports are looking like, how do we understand these reports from SAP? As we discussed, tomorrow as a consultant, you have to show all these things to your user, to your client. As a consultant, you have to provide a training to your users. As a consultant, you have to prepare the user manual, training document for this. And when we know that tomorrow we need to work on these areas, you must make sure that you are confident on these areas first. Forget about your interview. That is just a 30-minute activity that you can anyway clear. But after that, every day you have to sit in front of SAP for 8 hours. Imagine if you do not have confidence, imagine if you are not comfortable, will you be able to sit 8 hours a day? You do not know when, who will come, who will ask what question, what issue they will report, what they want me to explain. You will be scared, you will be feeling nervous, you will be feeling uncomfortable every single moment. You should not be in that situation. Instead, you should be comfortable, you should be confident enough if you know the basic fundamentals. The same basic fundamentals are applied in your SAP, and you can do your complete SAP FICO with full confidence. You will not have to worry for anything. You will not have to depend on anybody. Even if there is no support, even if there is nobody around you to help you, you still have your confidence, you still have your knowledge that will make you to move forward, to proceed further with whatever the issue, with whatever the struggles that you face in front of you in your project. So that kind of a confidence is what you have to gain, for which the way you understand should be different right from the scratch. Because it is not about knowing the config, it is not about doing the config. It is about understanding business process, it is about defining business process, it is about explaining, delivering your business process. That is what you do it. You nowhere call it as configuration, everywhere you call it as business process, business requirement. If you're not talking about a business process, if you're not talking about a business requirement, whatever we do is not called as your actual SAP FICO learning. It's not called as your practical learning. It's only theoretical, which is called as you are knowing about SAP. You are not learning SAP. If you are knowing about SAP, your knowing knowledge will not help you clear your interview. Even if it helps, it will not help you work confidently on the project. But instead, if you learn SAP, that learning knowledge will help you clear your interview. That learning knowledge will help you perform better in your project, perform better in your job. Learn more and more, you get interest. Moreover, you get comfortable, you feel confident. Clear? So I'll stop here for today. In the tomorrow's session, we will be taking one simple example and we will complete one accounting cycle. Once we complete one basic accounting cycle, I will start discussing about how this accounting is related to SAP. What we do actually in SAP as a FICO consultant, how this accounting, whatever we are discussing, is related to those points. Because straight away, if we talk about SAP, we may not be able to understand relate accounting. If you are able to relate accounting to SAP, the way you look at the system, the way you understand SAP is different. So you start feeling comfortable, you start feeling confident right from the beginning. Clear? Alright, let me stop this recording.